What is the most fucked up thing a person you know has done? My father murdered my mom and my sister as watched. I was about 10 at the time, maybe a bit older, and my sister was 12. It was a normal night. My father was eating his daily pot of pickles and my mother was sewing in her chair. Me and my sister were sent to bed as my father left the house to run an errand or something. I fell asleep as usual, but recall waking up an hour or so later to my bedroom window open, and I had a sense of unease. The hairs on my arm were standing on edge and I had goosebumps all over my body. Movement was coming from the corridor. I sprang out of bed and crept towards my door. A shadow crossed the landing, and as I opened the door, I saw a figure standing at the edge of the corridor. Immediately, I recognized it as my father. He was breathing heavily and standing over two bodies. At first I was uncertain. Perhaps he had bought some animals back from hunting, but even my 10-year-old self knew something was wrong. Then it hit me. Those bodies weren't any bodies, they were my mother and sister. Blood was gushing from their heads and a blade was fixated in my mother's stomach. There were bits of skin and muscle scattered throughout the corridor. Blood was splattered across the white walls and a pool of it was beginning to form. My father just stood over the bodies and stared. I was frozen. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to scream, but nothing would come out. At this point, I didn't think things could get worse. But this quickly changed. My foot moved and hit a creak in the floorboard. I whimpered and remember a ghostly chill overcame me. My father turned around at the edge of the corridor. Blood was all over his clothes. I'd never seen him like this before. He laughed and grinned before walking towards me. What happened next will always haunt me. My father started walking towards me. He was covered in blood and I just stayed frozen to the spot. As he got closer, he knelt down beside me and whispered to me, "Go back to bed." I was scared for my life, so I went back to my room and climbed back into bed. I didn't sleep that night. I was hoping it was all just a bad dream and that I would wake up with my mom forcing me out of bed as usual. But as it came closer to morning, reality began to settle. When I got out of bed that morning, the corridor outside my room was spotless. It smelt odd, like it had been cleaned or painted. It was a strong smell, like bleach or something. I went downstairs and was looking for my father when I found him slumped out on the sofa, still covered in blood. I walked around him and into the garden, which is where I realized it was definitely not a nightmare. Two big holes had been dug in the flower beds, which confused me at first, but then I saw the two bags by the door covered in blood. I was shook. I recall just standing in the garden staring back and forth between the door and the hole, intrigued as to whether or not I should look in the bags. Something was off though. After hours, my dad hadn't woken up. He hadn't even moved. Even my 10-year-old self knew that that wasn't right.